Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Politically Incorrect Knitters. I'm Deplorable Knitter. I'm joined, as always, by the lovely and wonderful Pinkava. And today we have a very special guest. We're joined by Cathy Carron. So it's very exciting.
Thank you for asking me to do this.
Yes,
I've watched every single episode of yours.
Oh, that's so nice.
But thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been very interesting. And I've learned a lot, actually. I've enjoyed Anne's point of view. I love Anne's international reportage. And it's really interesting because I'm a big Brexit fan as well. And I love hearing about DK's family life and her children and how she's juggling everything, because that's what I did for years.
Yes, it's good to know I'm not alone. I get so many messages after I talk about like homeschooling or something. People are like, I've done it. You're going to be fine. Your kids will turn out fine. Don't worry. Yeah. It's very nice to have community.
Yeah.
Cathy, we were hoping you could give us a slight overview of your designing and what kind of stuff you've done. You've been doing it quite a bit longer than Anne and I have. So any advice for us newbies?
Right. What got you started in designing?
In a nutshell, I was actually living in London writing a book on an addendum, which I wanted to be an addendum to Anne MacDonald's book, No Idle Hands, which is a whole story unto itself. And when I came back, I was trying to find a publisher for it. And in the course of waiting to do that, I started designing hats because my head is so big. It really is. I've got like a 23-inch circumference head, and I could never find a hat to fit. So I thought I was going to design the perfect hat for me. I ended up knitting hundreds of hats, literally hundreds of hats. And then finally one day I picked up the phone and I called Classic Elite Yarns. And I said to them, I have a lot of hat patterns. Are you interested in publishing me? Or would you be interested in doing a book? And they said to me, we don't know, let me talk to the owner. And they got back to me and they said, we don't publish other people's patterns, but we'd like to see what you're doing. So I drove down to Stonington, Connecticut to Pat Chu. Pat Chu was the owner of Classic Elite Yarns at the time. Unfortunately, she's since died. But I went down to Pat's house and she had her entire staff there that day. And I did my dog and pony show with my hats. And I told them about my book on military history. And she was so interested. Pat was an amazing woman. And she was so interested in what I was doing. And she said, I want to find you a publisher for both ideas. She found me a publisher for the hat book. Political reasons, my military knitting book never got out. But it was Pat Chu from Classic Elite Yarns. And it broke my heart that she died about 4 years after that. So I got a contract with Lark Books. At the time in the industry, there were not many hat books. So I got Lark Books, said that they would publish my book. The first book, Hip Knit Hats, was great. It worked out wonderfully. It was I think it's sold more copies than any other hat book ever. And then I did a second book with Lark, which was just awful. And when you do books for a publisher, I never had, even with Soho Publishing, which is Vogue Knitting, I've never had control over my books, the look of my books. Basically, you give them the material and they give you your look. And that has been one of my huge frustrations over the years, that I never really could control my own material. But anyways, after my second book with Lark, I was really upset. And I picked up the phone again. And this is just a lesson for everybody. Don't be shy. Pick up that phone. I picked up the phone again, or I emailed Trish Malcolm at Vogue Knitting. And I said to her, I don't know if you know who I am, but I would love to publish under you. And I'm telling you, in a couple of minutes, I got an email back from her and she said, come in, let me talk to you. Wow. And that's how I kind of got going. And, and then Soho Publishing, which is Vogue Knitting, they published, I think, five books for me. And we just did one right after the other, collection, one right after the other. And I got kind of like a jump start into the industry. And that's kind of where I am today.
That's very cool. It's
yeah.
It's interesting too. You weren't shy, and that got you. I think so many people are so waiting for things to happen to them. You went out and you made it happen.
Right, and you know, it wasn't shy. I think I was desperate. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I so much wanted to have work, and yet done corporate work before, and I really didn't want to go back into a corporation. I just did not want to do it, and I just figured out I had to figure out a way to make my life work again. And I think it was more desperation than anything. I felt like I had no alternative at the time, and I knitted like a professional. I wrote one pattern after the other pattern after the other pattern. I just worked like I was in a corporation. And I got, like you, I got my kids out for the day and I got them settled. And then once the kids were in school, whatever, I came back home and I worked like I had a work day. And I mean, to the extent this, you know, we can talk about later the Ravelry thing if you want, but I mean, I never even knew that there were forums on Ravelry. I never talked on forums on Ravelry. I didn't have time. I was just so busy doing the work.
Right.
And I'm a big believer in doing the work. So.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And that's a good reminder to me because I have a lot of patterns, but when I have downtime, I don't necessarily sit down and work at it like a job, because by the time I get to the point of sitting down, I'm kind of tired and I don't really want to do it. And, you know, it's a good reminder that sometimes you just got to do it if you want to make it happen.
Yeah, but you know, you also have to be easy on yourself. Like I said, I had children at the same time too. And I personally believe family comes first. I mean, I always took my kids first, you know, but once the kids were settled, I was in my office working. But I truly believe family comes first. And I've never skimped on that, I don't think.
To go back to something that you mentioned with your wartime knitting book, I've been following your Museum of Wartime Knitting on Instagram, and it's just wonderful, fascinating stuff. The more recent letters of families from Australia who got together for knitting groups for World War II, just incredible things that you're capable, or that you have in your collection.
I have more, and you know, the reason why I started that actually in 1994. I'm much older than you guys. I have a very long life. After I had my kids, I read Anne McDonald's book like in 1994, and I loved her book, but I thought it was incomplete. I had so many questions after I read her book, and I started to do my own research on it. And within 6 months, I gave a lecture at the Big Apple Knitting Guild in New York.
Uh-huh.
And that was it. I was kind of like, I didn't want to, but I did. Somebody pushed me into doing it. And because I was just doing preliminary research. And then within 2 or 3 days after giving this lecture in New York, my phone rang. I'm in my office and my phone rang. It was Anne McDonald.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, Anne McDonald's on the phone. And we had a wonderful conversation. She was lovely. At the time, she was living in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I talked to her about why I was doing it. Somebody from the Big Apple Needle Guild told her that what I was doing, clearly. And that's why she called me. And I told her what I was doing. She was so unbelievably gracious. And I said to her, I was very excited about doing, I asked her about the holes in her research that I thought there was, and she said, no, she said her editors cut her back big time.
Oh.
And it's, you know, she was really professional about it. We went back and forth about how her book was constructed and everything else. And she wished me well. She said to me, and I'll never forget this, she said to me, you're going to have a good time. And I was totally titillated. And just like within 3 months later or 6 months later, I was transferred to London with my husband. I didn't transfer. My husband transferred to London for work. He was in finance. And I took my family, my kids, and my research to London, and I lived there for 2 years. But in the course of living in London and doing research in the British Library, I realized it's not really an American story as much as it is a British story. And the reason I say that, and the reason why I think my research is important, because the British controlled the world wool supply during both world wars. And they did it through their own legislation. And they literally bought the entire clip of Australia and New Zealand for the duration of the First World War and for a year afterwards. And when the Second World War started, they did the same thing. And they did it to keep the Germans out of the wool markets. They used to have auctions, and the Germans would go to the auctions, and the Greeks and everybody would go to the wool markets. They wanted to keep the Axis out of the Axis countries out of the wool markets. So they just said to Australia and New Zealand, we will buy everything. And it's a really interesting story, which I researched. But anyways, in the course of living in London, I got to meet the Queen Mother twice. in her role as, I know, as, she was the patroness of Queen Mary's Needlework Guild, and I went to the guild meetings. I met with prisoners of war that had been in German camps, 2 men in particular. I had been in the Imperial War Museum in London, and there was this perfect shawl collar sweater. And I said to the curator at in the museum, I said, "Who knit that sweater? It's like perfect. It's amazing." And he said, "Oh, they knit those. They used to take apart their socks, and then they would knit sweaters for themselves." And he said, "You know, the man who knit that sweater is still alive. Would you like to meet him?" And I said, "I'd love to meet him." And it took about 6 months to make that connection. But I spent an afternoon with these 2 men, and I heard their stories about, they were transferred through, I think it was 5 or 6 war camps during the Second World War, and what they did and how they did it. And that in and of itself was an interesting story. So anyway, I wrote this book, and this is my first clash with political correctness. When I was trying to sell the manuscript to different universities, they would give it to 2 scholars, usually a military historian who was a man, and you could tell by the writing, and they never identified who these people were, and they'd give it to a feminist scholar, who was often a woman. I had so many comments. The men would say, "This is really cutting edge military history. This is amazing, blah, 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 blah. I mean, no one's ever written about the wool supply during the war." And then the feminist historian would always say, "Oh, no, these women were victims. And you have to write about this in the current, model, the paradigm of academia, which woman as victim." And I was like, really? I just thought it was such dishonest history. I said, these women didn't feel they were victims. These women knit because they wanted to knit. It was a patriotic effort to knit. So
they did honest work that furthered the war effort. If the wool market is important, then how is their knitting not important? You're devaluing it by saying that they must be put in a different light.
Absolutely. And I tried for a couple of years to get that manuscript published. It was very painful. And I'll tell you something, I had 3 universities. I think it was Purdue, Minnesota, and Colorado. And the last university sent me my manuscript back, and they sent me a letter. And you know what? I never even opened it. I never even opened the letter. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I didn't really understand where academia was. I didn't know, I wasn't woke, but this is 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago when academia was getting really woke. And I refused to write as women as victim. These women did not see themselves as victim. I rewrote part of the manuscript for them. I changed the introduction, and I put in a part that said, I talked about them in very unique cases where women could have been seen as victims. Like sometimes during the suffragist movement, women were thrown into prison. And I remember there was an occasion where somebody threw knitting needles and yarn back into them and said, "Go and knit." And, something very derogatory. Right. But that was really the exception. It really, the women who knit during World War I and World War II did it because they felt that was their contribution to the war effort. Maybe it'll get out. I mean, sometimes I think I'll go back to it. It's painful. It's a very painful part of my life.
It is. And it's a pity that so much, that you've put so much effort in it. And like you said, that it was reviewed, cutting edge research, and that's fallen by the wayside when there's so much supply and demand and so many basically clothing people. And having that, I think that having clothing be devalued as women's worth or women's work is just as derogatory to women as saying, if you're going to victimize women, you are victimizing them again by saying that what they have done is not worth researching.
Academics, they have a political agenda. Fact doesn't play in their life. It's all about the politics, and it's like even worse today, as we know. Facts and history, it doesn't play into their calculus. It's just not there. It's sad. I think it's really sad. But that was my first bump into this idea of being woke and the new academic and whatever. I was so busy raising kids. I had no idea what was going on in universities. And then I bumped into that and I thought, whoa, what's this?
Right. And also back in, the 90s, there wasn't social media. There wasn't the huge I mean, maybe there was still a bias in the news, but it's not like it was. So it probably wasn't nearly as obvious either back then that it was happening. It was
I agree.
probably a
It was
quieter
subtle.
movement. Yeah.
Yeah, it was subtle. And it was, no, let's put it this way. The best word is it was insidious. If I can be very blunt, it was insidious.
Yep.
But like I said, at the time when I was trying to do that and I was struggling, the design jumped off, the design part of my life. And I just took whatever presented itself and just ran with that ball. Which I look back and I think maybe that was the ball I was supposed to take. I mean, I have a degree in economics and a business degree in business. But I really wanted to go to art school in the very beginning, but my mother wouldn't let me. You know, we didn't come from money. So she said to me, go to school, make money, buy art instead of make art. So here I am, how many decades later, and I feel like I'm making art or my own art. So, you know, it all comes around. I think if you're creative, it's very hard to suppress it. I just do. I think if you have a creative impulse, whether it's writing, whether it's knitting, I think it's really, really hard to suppress it. It just bubbles up. It just comes up. It's like in a form of expression. You just can't let it go. And even during this current period of very wokeness, I mean, there's sometimes I get so discouraged. I just want to, you know, I want to delete my knitting stuff. I just want it to go away. But then I know that I just can't. It's just part of me and it's part of what I do today. I do have many friends who have walked away from knitting because of the current environment. And it breaks my heart. You know, it just really breaks my heart. It shouldn't be that way.
No, it's really, really sad. And I know I've mentioned it before, but a lot of people have said to me since I came on to Ravelry, like since all the stuff went down, that they don't knit anymore. They have no desire to. They've taken all the joy out of it. And it's really too bad because a lot of people, it's an outlet. It's a...
Yeah, you know, this is in the Ravelry thing. That was what, 2016. That was another thing that shook me. The knitting industry, as you know, goes in cycles. It's not always bouncing and booming, and it really does go in cycles. And when it's really, you know, going, it's exciting, and a lot of people are doing it, and then it comes down into a trough. And for the past 5 to 6 years, by the time the 2016 election had come along, the industry was struggling. I mean, it was really, there were stores that were closing everywhere, and it was difficult. And you know what Ravelry did? It was like kicking it in the nuts. I mean, I'm telling you, what Ravelry did really, really, I don't think they realized, and I know, and again, they don't care. They've got a political agenda. They don't realize what they did to the industry in and of itself. They are not very good business people, to say the least. But it was very upsetting what happened there. And I'm still kind of parsing all that. And what I feel about what happened there. Everybody on our side knows what's been going on. I mean, I did 3 hats basically in 2016. I did a Trump hat, a Hillary hat, and a neither hat in 2016. And what was really interesting, you know, Trump had Make America Great Again. Trump has always had Make America Great Again. Hillary, I have to tell you, she was a hard one to nail down. Hillary, and this is indicative of how bad her campaign was. She had like 6 different logos. It was 6 different song, you know, what is it, logos in like a period of a year. So it was like every time I would knit a hat, she'd come up with another I'm with her, and then it would be something else. And she never really had a consistent message.
The only one that I remember is I'm with her, and then there was like an arrow in it. So,
yeah,
but
it looked like a hospital. It looked like a hospital sign.
So, and I did it as an exercise in knitting letters. I did not knit those 3 hats as a political statement. I'm not interested in flogging my political affiliation with people. I'm just not. But, and
as a designer, it's election season. Just, you know, that you're like, okay, here's one for you, and here's one if you don't like anybody. Here you go.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. And so those hats sat from up to 16 to 2018. They sat on that Ravelry, and then all of a sudden, you know, the little social justice warriors come out, and it's like, oh my God, she's a sinner, she's a white supremacist, and all that sort of stuff. But the worst thing of it is, I went onto Instagram and I said to people, I'm not a racist, I'm not a white supremacist, I might be a capitalist because I like to sell my hat patterns, And you have no idea how many people dropped me when I explained what was happening. And you know, it's one thing when you get it. No, and I know you're well in your 20s and both in your 30s, but these kids who are going out and wrecking people's businesses.
Yeah.
And I want to say I'm disappointed, but I don't know them, so I can't say I'm disappointed. But I'm really, 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 really shocked at the adults that participated in this cancel culture. The adults that owned yarn shops, the adults that were designers, the adults that should have known better. I'm absolutely, positively shocked. And I would love to name names, but I won't.
And especially if you've known each other for years. I mean, designers have a sort of club of their own, I would say, especially if you've done well to a certain point. And then to suddenly kick people out for...
Yeah. It just, you know, it just says to me, I just can't get over the level of hate. And I was having a conversation with my husband at dinner last night, and you know, it's just, there's so much hate on the left today. And it's like, we were just kind of musing, where does this hate come from? And we were kind of positing different theories of the hate. But it's, I mean, here's an extreme example. I walked with a woman every morning in New York. I live in New York most of the year. I walked every morning from the year of 49 years old up until I was almost 60 with her every morning. And then we went to Pilates twice a week together. The day after the vote for Trump, oh, and this is like when I was 50, she said to me, I'm a socialist. And I like, oh, good, big deal. I don't care. You know, I'm of this, I'm of that, whatever. She knew I was conservative.
Right.
But we still continued to walk for years. But the day after the Trump vote, she hasn't talked to me since. And she used to say to me, you're the nicest person. You do this for me. You do that for me. And it's like, yeah, but because of a vote, she's, you know, willing to let go of a friendship that I've known her for 25 years.
Right.
I found it absolutely shocking. I just was like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Right.
Which makes me
you thought you could agree to disagree, and then nope, done, over. You won, we're done.
It shows to me, a certain neuroses. I mean, I really do think there's a psychological component of it, that these people are not stable. I'm sorry, they're just not stable. You don't behave this way as an adult. You just don't. There's something wrong. It's just in my book, there's something wrong with you.
Well, I mean, even friendships, like, that's small potatoes compared to the people who like won't let their parents see their kids because of their political affiliation.
Ooh,
I don't remember what I was listening to, but it might have been Rush one day where the guy was saying I had a Trump sign in my yarn, and I got a letter from my kid saying that if I didn't take the Trump sign down and not talk about politics, he wasn't going to let me see my grandkids anymore. So, I mean, like, friendships, I mean, that's bad enough, but because I don't agree with my kids, they're going to cut me off from the family. It's just, the whole thing doesn't make any sense.
You can't help but think it's not intelligence, it's emotion, and it's psychological. Like, what is wrong with it's sad. You know, you don't conduct yourself like this as a human being.
The liberal mentality of you must be made to care. That about this issue, it's not just you have to have this position, but you have to match my emotional intensity about it right now. A story I heard of a lady who, it was right after the George Floyd incident, and everyone was posting black squares on Instagram. She was called into her office at work for not posting a black square. Not even that she had spoken against the black square, but that she hadn't put the black square herself. Like, what's wrong with you? Well, why didn't you do this? Like, and that you're not even excused for letting it fall by the wayside for, you know, maybe she just wasn't on social media at the time, that was not allowed, that you had to be on the same page ideologically, but you also had to move at the exact moment and with the exact amount of conviction as everyone else did.
Would you call that liberal fascism? I read on, you know, when this whole thing was going on Ravelry, I read, and I wish I could remember the name of this woman. She talked about chasing down a yarn owner. I don't want to tell you the yarn company's name, but on her Instagram post, she talked about chasing down a yarn owner in a trade fair so that she would post her BIPOC statement or whatever it was. And she confronted her. And this woman, as a yarn owner, she didn't want to take a public position. And this woman literally harassed her for this. And she was proud to talk about it online. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, that's psychotic behavior.
Right. As if she gets points for harassing somebody, that is the moral thing to do in this situation.
It's crazy.
Well,
it's nuts.
It's the double standard of the left too. Like if I were to go after somebody saying, tell me what you feel about, I don't know, whatever, I would be condemned for that. But it's because they're doing it, they're on the right side, so it's okay if they do it.
It's all virtue signaling.
Praise. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But so when Ravelry happened, you did take down your patterns, correct? Or are you still on Ravelry?
No, I have a lot of patterns up, and I'm published by quite a few magazines and people, and I feel that I didn't want to dishonor the work that I've done before, and I don't want to get upset with the publishers I've worked for before. So I'm keeping my stuff up there because it's part of their booklets and all this stuff. So I have an account up there. I took all my own patterns that you would download patterns for, and I moved them over to Etsy. I'm now in the process of actually putting them on my own website. But I was talking, you mentioned this morning in an email to me that they were taking down blue line patterns.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, they did take down all the thin blue line patterns, or the majority of them.
Right.
Yep.
And I was thinking about what you said, and I was thinking about, I think, like, what would I tell you? And I feel like my first inclination, I have two impulses to talk to you about it. One is as a businesswoman, and the other one is as a mom. My first impulse as a business person is like, cut your losses. It's really, their business model, the way they've construed it, is not good right now. They've created such a polarized environment. Why would you want to be in that environment? As a mom, again, it's kind of like the same advice. Cut your losses. Just I really believe in positivity, and the way that the little what do they call, the BIPOC people hate positivity. They call it toxic positivity. I'm a big proponent of positiveness and just do it and whatever. And I would just say, go to that place in the world where there's good energy coming from. There's not good energy coming out of Ravelry.
Right.
I just say stay clear of it. I think you need to go where people appreciate you, love you, and there's good energy coming out of it. There ain't good energy coming out of Ravelry. As a mom, I would say to my daughter, don't go there. Just stay away. These aren't nice people.
Right.
And I know it does give you, the thing is, you can decide to be on Ravelry, post your pattern, but don't get upset if they edit you either. Just consider it, it's a weird, funky environment. Use it for you, but don't get upset about it. You're not going to change the way they think.
Right.
You're just not.
Right. It's a tool, and if you are one of the people that is still making money off of it, then as a capitalist, I say go for it. But obviously, I'm just not even allowed on there. I was told in no uncertain terms that get the heck out of our site. But it just, the thing about the thin blue line patterns that really bothers me is that they still have their all cops are bastards pattern up, and they're just pushing this far left agenda. And I just don't understand how people who are against that are still okay with supporting the site. I guess it's like a
Listen, my daughter, you're never going to understand. They're ideologues. It's like a religion. They're ideologues. They're not going to change. Don't even spend any more energy thinking about this. It's bad juju. It's bad energy. Just move on over. No joke.
Well,
no joke.
I know you're right. And it's funny though, because so many people are pushing against the cops, and even where I'm living, we've had talks about defunding the police and whatever. Yesterday, I was outside with my husband. He was waxing the cars, so I was helping him wax the cars. And all of a sudden, there were sirens. We live near a corner. There were sirens, and so obviously I had to look at what's going on, because that's what you do. And all of a sudden, there was this parade of cars and motorcycles and semis, and they all had American flags on them, or thin blue line flags. There were some Trump flags. it was a 20-minute parade of cars. I called my mom, who happened to be in the town that is 15 minutes away, and she's like, yeah, we've been sitting here at this light for like 5 minutes waiting for these to go by. I said, well, they just stopped here, so you've got like 15 more minutes. But I think that people are getting sick of this nonsense. Like, we've seen what's happening. There's all these protests, there's all this, and finally, like, normal people are starting to say, hey, this isn't okay anymore. But like, I don't think that's going to happen for Ravelry. They have too many people that are too far left to be hurt by that. But it seems like people who are like center or to the right are finally like, I'm over this. And that's why we had a 20-minute car parade of supporting the cops and supporting the president and things, because people are just over it.
They closed down Fifth Avenue in New York yesterday with the Trump parade. I'm like,
oh, they did?
New York, yes.
And I didn't even hear of that one. That's awesome.
Yeah, they closed down Fifth Avenue, which is like, wow. That said, I'm living in the country until this COVID thing's over, so I don't go back into my apartment in New York, but I keep up with all the news in New York. It's not always good. I'm surrounded by blue. It's very hard. Connecticut, New York, it's a lot of blue around here. But you know, the thing in all this whole period, these people who have stopped talking to me or associating with me, in a way, have done me a favor, in a sense that who needs that energy? And in the meantime, I've made some incredibly new friends. And you know, I find people on the right a lot happier bunch. They're just you can feel it from them. And I don't know, I was talking to my husband about this too, like, what is it about? Is it their religiosity or their magnanimity? I just feel a different feeling from people on a conservative. And that's where I kind of want to be. I mean, for many reasons, but I feel better when I'm around people on the right now. I don't want to have to deal with the craziness.
If nothing else, we can take a joke.
That a lot of the people on the right are just nicer.
They're calmer. They're, I gotta tell you, the people on the left, to me, are really neurotic. I mean, why would you do the things that you're doing if you weren't unbelievably neurotic? I mean, I get the feeling the neuroses level is much lower on the right than it is on the left. You know,
I mean, there's crazy people everywhere. We can't discount that. But as a whole, it seems like there's a lot more.
Right.
We're happy to let you live and let live, and we don't all have to agree. There's not that lockstep need on our side as much.
Right. There's something also, you probably heard this. You get to the point, you guys aren't there yet. You're still nice and young. It gets to a point in life where, you know, you basically just aren't going to take the bullshit anymore. And people say this, you get to be 60 and you realize you basically your days are numbered. You kind of know how many years you have left based on a number of parameters. Life becomes very different as you get older. And so people at 60 begin to evaluate, how do you want to spend your time and who do you want to spend it with? And you really, really think about this hardly in a way that I can't express this to you, how it's hard when you're 20, 30, 40. You don't think about that yet. You don't have to think about it yet. You get to be my age and you're like, what's important and what isn't important? And you're willing to cut off some arms and cut off some friendships because you just say, you know what, life's too short. It really is too short. You can see the end of the tunnel at this point. Where I'm 63. You can see the end of the tunnel. I went to a funeral last week. My mother's also ailing. I have friends around me who are ailing. You know, you can see the end of the tunnel. Don't spend your time with people who are going to take away from you. Spend your time with people who are going to give to you and that you can give to also. I just can't tell you that enough. I mean, I just cut your losses, you know, just don't devote the energy to people who are negative, you know, and it becomes that brutal. It becomes that clear at 63, 64, 60, whatever. It just becomes that clear.
Very good advice though. And I think that it's something that a lot of people do need to hear because I don't know, I was raised to give people a chance and to be kind and to be this and that, but you know, if they're not going to give back to you, is it really worth putting in? Right.
But you know what? I spent years doing that too. I spent years giving people the benefit of the doubt. I consider myself, I'm a very opinionated person. I'm very judgmental, but I'm not mean. And I really give people the benefit of the doubt. I really, I always see, I love weirdos too. I love people who are eccentric and have something going on here. I find that fascinating. But I don't tolerate meanness or underhandedness. I hate a liar. There are certain standards that I just cannot tolerate. But when I was younger, oh my God, I think I gave too many people the benefit of the doubt. And I wish when I was younger, I had sieved a little bit more through my relationships. I think I spent time with people who it really wasn't worth it. But you only know that through hindsight.
Right.
You
right.
don't know
Even,
that when you're going through it.
right. Even some, friendships or, people that I've known at work that, oh yeah. Well, they can be a little rough to work with sometimes, but they're okay. And then afterwards you're like, why did I put up with any of that? Actually, that was horrible. Why was I,
Yeah.
I know. So what are you knitting?
I am working on a Blurry Flurry by Cozy Up Next.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And this is, I think it's called Emerald Isle by Potion Yarns. I posted it on Instagram. I said, I don't know the name of the colorway, and Joanna kindly supplied it, but I didn't write it down, so I still don't know the colorway. So I could find it, but this is, it's just a hat.
It's beautiful yarn.
So what about you? What do you have going on?
I'm knitting a sweater, which I don't want to show you because I'm going to submit it to a magazine.
Oh.
Okay.
But I'll show you what I did. This is on my website. I'll show you what I did this year. You saw did you see my COVID hat, my COVID scarf? And it says flatten the curve on one end. And it says, wake me when I'm over. You know that song by, I forget the guy's name, Wake Me When It's Over? Mm-hmm. So I took all my scrap DK yarns and I made this incredibly long scarf. I made this last spring, and the graph is actually on my website, but I just took it out now because it's getting cold out and I can actually wear it now. But it's kind of like a commemorative scarf. It's kind of like going to be a reminder of what a crappy year this was.
Right. And also, so we can remember our history, because after all, who says flatten the curve anymore?
I know. No, seriously, that was in the spring. Remember that was in the spring?
I know, it's crazy. Just like, we've talked a bit about masks, and that, who can remember in the spring when nobody had a mask? I had my first COVID stimulus check before masks happened. You have to remember that wasn't a thing through the first sort of burst of the virus. Wow, how that just kind of gets brushed to the side.
Have you felt, I've sometimes felt like this is, they say there's 5, 6, 7 stages of death. And when the COVID thing first happened, it was kind of like, oh, this is novel. We all have to stay in. And it was kind of like, this is kind of fun. Let's all Zoom. And it was that. And then it kind of sunk in this is where we're at. And now we have to quarantine. And you kind of went through these different stages. Now I'm off at the really end of I'm at the pissed off stage. It's like I've had enough.
I think a lot of people are. A lot of people are just over it. And it's true. My kids and I were Zooming with all different family members and friends. And now, I just can't be bothered to do it anymore because I'm over it. And if you want to see me, then let's go outside and meet, because I'm not Zooming. This is stupid. But
even to go to the grocery store, it's a big deal. Even to jump into a store and just to do something just for the moment. And it makes me not want to go anywhere.
I think that's a lot of people that, before you'd be like, oh, well, as long as I'm in town, I'll stop in and I'll pick up a few things. And it's I don't want to go in unless we're out of everything.
My friend Anne, did you knit anything this week?
I did.
Is it your sweater?
Well, I did knit my sweater, but I'm also knitting a secret thing. But it is a secret thing, not for the general public. It's a secret thing for specifically if my mother is watching. Don't.
Oh.
And skip ahead. Don't do that. Anyways, I am knitting. And it's all bunched up, so you can't quite see. But it is a cowl. And it is, here, let me get the color in because it is absolutely gorgeous. It is There we go. It's
really
called,
beautiful.
yeah, it is called Midnight Pumpkin by Quirky Fiberworks. I think she's only on Facebook, but I bought it. We have a local fiber fair in Watertown, South Dakota every year, which was canceled this year. But last year I got this yarn from her, and it is absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
Very cool.
lovely.
But yeah, the plan for this is that I'm knitting the cowl flat, and I put eyelets down the side. So but anyways, that the plan is it's a square and then it has eyelets down the side. So I'll have buttons, so it can just be a round cowl, or you can lay it flat and have it over itself. So it will button on the other side. So that's my plan.
That's nice.
Nice.
Very pretty.
Something simple and
Is it
as
is
opposed
it your
to
design, or is it
other things I do where it's just like a big American flag. Like,
right?
here, Mom, America.
Is it your design, or are you using somebody's pattern?
It's my design, which probably means that the buttonholes won't be even, but you know, it's nice.
Hey, that's all right. Your mom doesn't care.
Right, you can't really tell because you know, the stripes are so close together, but there's a kind of a basket weave pattern to it, but you can't really tell. But it'll be nice. I'll take pictures of it once it's done.
Does anybody have any thoughts on the president and the latest developments?
Oh.
You know, having COVID, and I just saw right before we started that the press secretary now has COVID.
You're talking about McEnany?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she said she didn't even know she had it. She says they're not, what's the word? She didn't know she had it because she had no symptoms.
Yeah, so she's asymptomatic. But yesterday I heard a whole huge outpouring of anger towards the president because he took that ride in the car and waved at the people. Did you guys hear that or no?
You know, I hear it all. You know, I got to tell you something. I am just so effing exhausted from people who are so hyperbolic about everything. It's like I can't even plug in anymore. It's like liar, liar, pants on fire. It's like it's just too much to kind of. I mean, I get the headlines, but it's just like these people are not expressing, or the press, a sense of proportion about what's important and what isn't. So it's very hard to listen anymore. I don't know if you feel that way.
You know, they're condemning the president for putting his Secret Service people at risk, and then I heard this morning that they volunteered to take him out. We don't know anything about the Secret Service. They could have already been positive. They could have immunity. Like, you don't know anything, but here you are making this huge fuss about something that you don't even have facts about. That's the part that really just, I don't understand. It irks me.
That's right. Did you see the picture I posted on my Instagram? I took a cab drive in New York, and in the cabbies in New York actually have a partition between the driver and the person in the back seat with an air vent in it. So I'm guessing there might even be a partition within the Secret Service car with that same type of function. So these people who say they know everything about what's going on, they don't. So like, I just like, it's like, where are you going to place your energy? It's not there, you know? This is just crazy. We're in crazy town. We're just in crazy town right now.
Yes,
well, for me, I haven't heard a whole lot about people being angry about it. I just thought it was a very gracious action that you have, you know, the president has put out these videos, which I thought were very nice. And even, you know, to the point of making a joke about Melania being younger than him. Yes, haha. That I laughed. And, you know, that the support that he has, that he can be ill and at Walter Reed, and immediately that there's going to be a huge crowd out there, that there's people saying that they're praying for him, that they're showing support, that, you know, it's getting cold now, and yet they're still hanging out outside 4 hours. And I think that it was a show of appreciation back, that, you know, people support him and he supports them too. And there is a certain amount of not just, you know, risk for, you know, the security guards and maybe getting COVID, but physical risk to the president when he does that. You know, just to parade around the people and to show that it is indeed him in this vehicle, and still he did it showing that it was important enough to thank the people who were outside for him. And I thought that was a very gracious action.
I think so too.
Well,
I think so too.
some of the people were saying, well, he was just irresponsible because, he's not well and he should be resting and blah, blah. Like, it just goes to show that they're going to be mad no matter what he does. There's really just no way that you can win.
Yeah. So how are you feeling about the election in general?
I don't know. I've seen so many Biden signs around my area, and even though I live in a blue state, I live in a conservative area. So I'm a little bit perplexed about that part of it. Like, there are a lot that have popped up lately, and I don't understand where they're coming from, where these people are coming from. So I don't know.
In the village I live in Connecticut, you can't put up any campaign signs until October. So they're just starting to come up. But I know who lives in my neighborhood, and I know who votes for what. And I know Trump supporters are not putting those signs up.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
They're petrified.
There is that. Right.
I mean, there's a huge, they're worried because of the violence on the left. But like I said, I know who these people are, and I think it's really funny. I also think it's kind of crazy that we have this cute little village that I live down here, and that these people, it just kind of talks to me about the arrogance of the left or business people, where they put political signs in front of their businesses. It's like, really? It's like, you basically, I just think it's a dumb business move. It's just a really dumb business move. I have a friend who's conservative, and she wanted to follow one of my other more political endeavors. And I told her, don't. I said, you have a business. I said, I appreciate your interest in what I'm doing, but don't do it. You shouldn't affiliate your business with a political party. That's not a good way to do business. And she didn't. I'm glad she followed my advice, but she's also a very good business person. I think she just wanted to be nice. But I think there's a lot of fear out there.
There is. But at the same extent, you have liberal businesses which will tell you that they're liberal and say that you ought to support them because they're liberal. And on the other side, while it's not necessarily a good business move to specifically politically align yourself if you're not a political business, but we have seen with certain yarn dyers that we have had on and other things that people who have accidentally become politically aligned, I guess, that they have shown a lot of support. A lot of people have shown them support because of that. That it's not entirely one-sided. That if you do say, "Hey, I'm conservative," that, well, like you said, in learning who your friends are, I think you'll be surprised who comes out for you and who's no longer your friend.
I guess my plan is just kind of like, I just don't want the controversy.
Right.
So I, want to step away from it. I even put like a pin on my hat in the garden, or I have a whole wardrobe of Trump shirts, but I wear them in the garden and nobody sees me because I'm in the woods. I'm not so sure I would wear them publicly because people take such great offense. I'm in a blue state. They take such incredible offense. And it's like, they get the screaming memes, and it's like, I'd rather not have them get upset. So, but in my own yard, I'm a crazy lady.
Well, I think you said before, you're a capitalist. You designed the patterns that were for everybody last election. And I think that for a lot of businesses, that's the way to go. My dad has a public facing job, and I was teasing him and I said, "Hey, let me make you a Trump mask." And he goes, "No, I would never wear that to work because that's not the place for my politics." And I think I totally understand that some businesses want to do that. Like me, I always meant to be political, so that's never something I had to worry about. But I think that for most people, it makes sense to kind of keep their beliefs on the down low. It's good business to do that.
Right. And I would say that, part of, we're all capitalists here, that part of capitalism allows for, I'll still do business with you if I disagree with you. Just in my personal life, in the place where I work, a lady came in who didn't know that I worked there. and who had very publicly on Facebook implied some rather nasty things about me, about my political beliefs. And that was quite an interesting moment. But she came in and it wasn't mentioned. I smiled, said, oh yeah, I helped her with what she needed and everything was nice. And, you know, that there was a first, I mean, if I had met her while I was not working, I mean, I would probably have, you know, been polite and reasonable anyways, but maybe would have confronted her about, hey, what are you doing saying things online? But right, that's not an awesome thing. But, you know, this is a work environment and I'm going to smile and I'm going to help you.
But even here's an example of that's I think is crazy, and it's to the extreme. We have a very good friend who's an admitting physician to Mount Sinai in New York, a hospital. He's a wonderful doctor. I just adore this man. He's conservative. His mother was an Italian immigrant, and he loves this country. He's my age. He's 63, and he said he wears a flag on his lapel every day. He said he's just so thankful to be in this country. But he said, you have no idea. This is in New York, mind you, how many people question him about why are you wearing the flag? That's how extreme it is in New York. I mean, you got people who are real, there's like incredible hate. And it's just like, it's just unnecessary. It's just crazy. But he's a very good-natured person, and he just kind of jollies them through and whatever. But when he told me that story, I was like, really? It's unfortunate, but that's where we were at this point. It's unfortunate that people, this such a lack of magnanimity. This is such a lack of grace. You know, this idea of grace and being gracious. I don't get it.
And I've said it before. It's because they think that we are bad people with bad ideas. We think they are good people with bad ideas. And that's where the breakdown is. It's that growing up, giving people the benefit of the doubt, accepting that people don't all agree the same things you do. They just can't tolerate anything. And that's the issue. But
why, you know, this idea of even judging somebody of being bad when you don't even know them. I mean, give me a reason to be bad to you.
I can make you that like me if you want me to.
Make sense.
That's true.
I actually have your Rowan book, but that's like, woohoo, that you're in it. I flipped through, I'm like, oh, look at that.
I know. That was exciting for me. But, you know, I'm sure who's behind that is Trish Malcolm.
Okay.
She was the publisher of Vogue Knitting, and like I said, she moved over to Men's Crafts. And I'm guessing that's what it was. I don't know. But one wonders whether one has a knitting career anymore.
It is unfortunate.
Seriously. So, I mean, which is, I don't know whether you know, but for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been self-publishing. I've done booklets because, well, first of all, the magazines are doing so terribly. I mean, if you look at them, they're like, there's no advertising in them at all. And second of all, who knows where the political stuff falls out? You know, I don't know. I don't know how they're judging things. That said, magazines, you know, in that business, they do need material and they do need designs. So they'd be kind of foolhardy to, you know, to turn away a good design. So who knows?
And I know that the moment has sort of skipped over for this, but you know, when you had your political beanies, your Trump and your Hillary, and you also had your Jordan Peterson shawl. That was also banned outright. And was that before or after the Trump ban that happened?
It was after, but it was quickly afterwards. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a Jordan Peterson fan. I mean, you know, I think anybody who has some wisdom to impart, whether it's in, you know, an ancient sage or, you know, I follow the stoic.com in Instagram. I think Stoic philosophy is very interesting. But I think Peterson has a lot of interesting things to impart. And I was inspired to do that shawl because of it was just such ordinary advice. You know, he goes, make your bed. But I think it was Colin Powell who first said, you know, if you can get up in the morning and make your bed, you're set for life. With the idea that you can instill a certain discipline in your life to get things accomplished. Basically, Jordan Peterson said that as well. You know, it's like things that your grandmother, your grandparents used to tell, just common sense advice. I think the reason why the shawl was banned, I do know why, he had a controversy up in Canada about, and he did not want it legislated. He did not want pronouns legislated. He did not want speech legislated. And he came out against, it happened to be, I think, the trans or community. He did not want this speech legislated, that you had to use these pronouns. And so that community came out against him, which is why K.C. Cassidy was so vehemently against Jordan Peterson. I mean, it's kind of like it's a child. What he did was childish, to ban Mike Howell. It's like, I don't have to listen to you, ban, you're gone. I mean, it's like, grow up. But, it was a controversy that had happened in years prior. But Jordan Peterson has had a lot to say, a lot of interesting things. He has a huge following around the world. Mm-hmm. And he is worth listening if anybody, cares to pick up his 12 Rules for Life. I bought his book for both of my daughters immediately and sent it to them.
Within the past year, I picked up a book by a man his name was Donald Keene, and he was a Japanese scholar at Columbia. And he was talking about, how he was always liberal, but very open to different ideas. And I'm reading his biography, like, how did this come from Columbia? Where can there be, Columbia University has one of the best English Japanese literature libraries in the world that I'm just like incredibly jealous of. But I'm like, but look at all the other horrible things you do. You have all of this information at your fingertips. You have this library. You should be a beacon of knowledge. And yet, the most liberal people you hear of also come from Columbia. And I don't know,
who's interesting at Columbia is John McWhorter. He happens to be Black. He's a scholar and he's a linguist. But he has a podcast with Glenn Laurie at Brown University, Glenn Laurie was the first Black PhD to graduate from Harvard. And these two men talk weekly with each other, and it's really a wonderful chat. They're very open-minded. So it's Glenn McLaurie and John McWhorter, but John McWhorter is the linguist from Columbia. So Columbia has some little gems in there, but they've got a lot of junk too.
Yep.
I live in the western part of Connecticut, which is the real country. And actually, the only county in Connecticut that voted for Trump. The only county. I know.
The flags.
You know what's really interesting here is we have a lot of New Yorkers here. They buy country houses, and they're all liberal. But anybody who's local and works around here, they were Republicans. Mm-hmm. Like if I hire stonemasons, and I mean, even my housekeeper who's an Ecuadorian, she's going to vote for Trump. I mean, the workers, the people who do the real work are conservative. And the people who come in with the money are the liberals. Right. And I sometimes wonder whether all these New Yorkers realize that everybody around them is a conservative. The locals are.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting.
My husband and I were just talking about that because I mentioned that there's been a lot more Biden signs. And we live on a lake, but the part of the lake we live on is the smaller houses. It's the cottages, it's the things that aren't very expensive. And so everybody who lives around us is a conservative. But the houses that I've seen the Biden signs at are the big lake houses that are owned by people who don't necessarily live right here.
Right. And I kind of wonder if the sort of liberal elites realize that no matter what they vote for, they like to live in districts populated by those deplorables.
Yes.
That makes for a more comfortable living.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that bothers me too about the liberalism in Connecticut and New York is that everyone assumes because everybody votes Democrat, they assume you think that way too. And I just, it's a certain arrogance living in a blue state. I just hate the arrogance of like, you should think like I do so I can say anything in front of you. I remember at a dinner party, a very fancy dinner party I went to a couple of years ago. And there were two gay men who were at the head of either table. There was a couple who was giving the party. And we were the 8 of us at the table. And this one woman piped up and she said, "Let's talk about Trump." And I said, but she didn't realize that other than the two gay men at the table, everybody else was a Republican. And I said to her, let's not. She wanted a controversy, and I think she didn't know what she was going to get. So I just shut her off at the quick. And afterwards, I emailed her and I said to her, I don't think you realized who was who and what you were beginning to do at that table. Right. She was shocked.
Like, we were having a nice time, and I'd like to be here through dessert.
There's a sort of like, yeah, there's an arrogance of like, I assume everybody thinks like I do.
Right. And
Like, that's not true.
I've seen that in less elite circles too, where someone who I have worked with has come in and they like, oh, let me tell you about the Trump controversy, and I'm like, do or there was a conversation between two people, and they like to rag on Trump all the time. And sure, you like to get together and rag on Trump. That's nice and everything. But they were talking about how could anybody even possibly vote for Trump? And they were talking about another coworker, and the other coworker, oh, he would never vote for Trump. He's reasonable. And I'm like,
I know.
well, I have news for you.
I know.
Like,
I think that's, but I see a ton of that here. I mean, a ton of that here. I remember going with a friend to listen to The View. We actually went into The View, like a shoot of The View in New York. And I went in with a bunch of girlfriends, and I'm sitting next to one of my girlfriends, and I think that was when, what's her name? The conservative, Elizabeth. And my friend sitting next to me, who I've known for years, we were friends in London, she said to me, oh, I can't stand that woman. And I said to her, oh, I love her. And that my friend looked at me and just like, what? I was like, no, I think she's great. And that was like the beginning of the end, I think. She's just like, I don't think like you. You don't even know who I am.
That's funny.
But it was, there've been little incidents throughout the years. It was Elizabeth Hasselbeck or whatever. She was the conservative voice of The View.
I think Rush Limbaugh said that, we know what they think, but they really don't know what we think.
Absolutely. They don't know. You know what? In all these years, nobody has ever asked me, why do you vote for Trump? No one has ever asked me that. They're not curious. They don't care, and they think it's all, they see his personality and they think, oh, this is, he's terrible. There's so many different layers of why you vote for Trump or not. And they don't even begin to try to figure that out. And I remember and after 2016, remember that book that came out, Hillbilly Elegy?
It rings a bell, but I couldn't tell you.
The guy's name was Lance something. He wrote about it. He's from Kentucky, and he wrote this book to explain what it was like to grow up in Kentucky, and why people think maybe differently than the coastal elites. Right. And all of a sudden on my Instagram, everybody I know was like, oh, I gotta buy a book of that Hillbilly Elegy. We've got to understand how these crazy people think. It was like, the Midwest was always considered the flyover country. Right. We don't care what they think. It was
the idea of like CNN reporters, they have to get a visa and we will send them to the middle of the country and they'll be like, don't you hate Trump? And then be surprised when people say they don't. Oh, after this, you'll never vote for him again, right? Yeah, still no. I'm still voting for him.
There's another book that preceded Hillbilly Elegy. It was called What's the Matter with Kansas? Again, trying to explain, how do these yokels vote?
Well, I think that the liberals sometimes forget too that we don't, because they want everybody in lockstep with them, that they don't remember that there are nuances. I don't necessarily like everything that Trump does. Anne thinks his tweets are hilarious. Sometimes they make me cringe, but that's the difference. I don't have to think that everything he tweets is perfectly awesome and wonderful. And I can still like him. I can still see that he's doing most of what he said and that he's a good guy at the heart of it. He might be brash. He might be off-putting at times, but it doesn't matter. We hired him to do a job, which he is doing.
I know, I feel the exact same. I love his pragmatism. And I just wanted somebody who would approach government in a pragmatic fashion. When Hillary said, I've got 60 policy papers, you can go to my website and read 60 policy papers. I mean, I'm an economist. I used to write that junk. It's like, I didn't want to vote for somebody who was an academic or somebody who had policy papers. I wanted to vote for somebody who actually would do something. I mean, Hillary was not my cup of tea. I've run many different levels. But, the fact that she kept on flogging these 60 policy papers used to drive me crazy. Like I said, I used to do that stuff. I wanted a doer. I wanted a pragmatic doer. He can be an a-hole occasionally. I can take that. I'm a big girl.
Well, and the nice thing about that is you know where you stand with him. There's never any gray area. There's never any, he's going to tell you like it is, and you might not like it. It might hurt your little snowflake feelings, but we know where you stand. And that's better than the whole double talk and everything.
Which is where when so many people say that he's bigoted or he's anti-Semitic, surely he would have said, like, You know,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, he's only saying, you know, statements in support of different communities because he's forced to. Oh, really? Do you think if he really, truly disliked people, he would be able to keep his mouth shut? Do you think that's this man right here? You see him? Like,
He is incredibly strategic. When he says something or does something, it just, I find it uncanny. I mean, he has a great, you know, sixth sense about stuff, which just, I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about him, but he has, his sixth sense is really amazing. I mean, few people can touch him for that. I've never, in my lifetime, like I said, I got some years on you, I've never seen a politician with a sense of the feeling for the people and for the environment and how to say things. Another thing, and I want to put this last point, or my last point about him, he has never disparaged the electorate.
right.
Hillary calls the electorate deplorables. Biden has called them dog-faced pony soldiers. Biden's called terrible names to the electorate. And, you know, people say, oh, isn't Trump terrible? He has these terrible names, whatever. But you know, he does make nicknames. And as you know, if you haven't seen my other website, I have knit all the nicknames that Trump has said. I have a roll. I have two 19-foot rolls of nicknames he has called other people. But if you look at what he did, he called these people, these were elitists. He called out individuals. He basically characterized individuals. But listen to Trump. He has never disparaged the electorate.
Right.
Even in the recent debate, they wanted him to call out white supremacists. He wouldn't do it on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
This man is really smart.
Right. And one of my favorite things that, you know, if he is, there's one specific speech that it was in Minnesota, and this is after a lot of Minneapolis is burned down, where he is not afraid of giving up his podium to other people. And here's a business owner whose business was burned down, and he will stand there and he will be quiet and he will let them speak. And when they speak, he'll ask them questions. And the questions aren't just, well, how are you doing? It's, okay, so your bar was burned down. Do you own the property or did you rent it? I own the property. Okay, so we're going to try to get some help to you. But he's not, he did a speaking event with Turning Point USA, and you have these young college kids and they're really nervous, and one girl had to kind of stop her speech and start it again, and Trump was never like, get her out of here. It was waiting, and afterwards he thanked her for the speech and he said very nice things, and then we moved to the next person. And he's not afraid of sharing stage as if it's going to diminish him.
I think that's a ruse. I think this whole thing is a ruse with him being vain or whatever. Trump likes to see things happen. He is a builder by nature. And I feel like I'm that way. I mean, I love to see things happen. I love to make things. I love to see things. I get that about him. And the sad thing about it is the Democrats have so tried to thwart his agenda. I think if he hadn't been thwarted in the first 3 years, I think infrastructure would have been a huge topic in the country. I mean, this guy wants to build stuff, and they have barely given him enough time to get anything done because they're chasing after a faux impeachment and all this other stuff. But I think in his heart, he is a builder. End of story. The guy likes to make things. He likes to see things, good things happen. I think that's a good thing.
You know, he's building up so much, and they can only see that as building things to destroy them. You know, with the mythology of Thor, that you have the hammer is to build or to destroy, and to have a certain amount of power and leadership is that. And then you have, you know, Trump, and we see him building, and they can only see him destroying things on the other side. You know, he is using the power he has to destroy, to take down, you know, like policies that harmed the Iron Range, that harmed lobster fishermen, and we see that as wonderful for building, and they're only seeing that as, look at all the harm he's done.
Oh, I think the Democratic Party today and the left is it's a party of nihilism. Mm-hmm. I really do. I think that I think there's a lot of bad vibes coming out of the Democratic Party. And I got to tell you something. I probably haven't told you before. I was raised a Democrat. I was a Democrat up until around 2008. And I mean, everybody in Massachusetts was a Democrat. I mean, right. But I can't imagine in my lifetime, unless they change big time, of voting a Democrat again. They're too negative. I talk about bad energy, bad voodoo. They're too negative, too destructive. I just couldn't, I just can't see myself going there again. I mean, unless they change their tune about this, but I mean, we all are. We're appalled at what they've done, aren't we?
Right.
I mean, it's
Absolutely.
just appalling. The personal destruction that's been going on. It's just sad. Is that not politics?
Is that enough politics for politically incorrect knitters? I'm not sure.
Well, we talked about knitting for once too, so that was good. Perhaps we should let it go there for now. Thank you, Cathy, for joining us today. And always remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to keep seeing our content.
I really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
Right. I've been really looking forward to having you on, so I'm glad it worked out.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the person someday too.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.